Dan Ives, Wedbush Securities Managing Director, joins us now. Maintains and outperform his price target right now, 300. And no surprise, perhaps, to our viewers, Dan, you're enthusiastic about what you believe will be the beginning of a super cycle as a result of many of the things that Steve was just talking about Apple going to be introducing. But I do wonder, were you at all concerned by Verizon, sort of their comments about lackluster demand thus far, or at least upgrades, AT&T, and T-Mobile, sort of all the same, or is it really just everybody waiting for these new features?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm not concerned, and in all of our checks in Asia that we've talked about here, September, I think the September quarter is going to be better than expected in terms of for Apple from an iPhone perspective. No one was expecting the really inflection point quarter where I think it starts to happen in December and into March. And everything we've seen from Asia, I mean, I see some others that have said the opposite. I believe this is tracking that it will be over 240 million units for the year. That'll be Apple's biggest iPhone unit year ever. So I think when it comes to AI, it's iterative, but especially with 18.2 and what we see in the holiday season, I think this is one. Street numbers still have to move up another 4 or 5%. It is the beginning of a super cycle, which is why I believe going to early next year, $4 trillion market cap, they will be the first to hit it.
I feel like you've used supercycle before, and when have you most recently used it to describe Apple and a new phone?
Sure. So I think when it comes to supercycle, if you look at maybe 2 years ago, that ended up just being what I call a strong product cycle instead of a supercycle. I think part of when you have to look at Apple, I view it as really the install base. I mean, if I go back 2 years ago, 180 million called given iPhones were an upgrade opportunity. This time it's 300 million. So even if we're 50% right, this is a stock that I think goes much higher because services, when you look at AI, it's not just about, Steve talks about 18.1, 18.2. This is now going to be the hundreds of apps built on Apple Intelligence, which is going to give an incremental 10, 15, 20 billion of services revenue. That is the key to this renaissance of growth from Cupertino.
But Dan, you need an iPhone 15 or an iPhone 16 to take advantage of all those Apple Intelligence-powered apps, and it feels like consumers were sold something at WWDC and through subsequent advertisements that they're just not going to be getting still for some time. What does it mean for the current quarter if we get some of these features today that are underwhelming and doesn't encourage people to upgrade?
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's really 18.2, which we'll get before holidays, that I think gives a lot of the promise that we saw at WWDC, but then ultimately it's about the March quarter. And what I love about this cycle, normally it's September, December, then all of a sudden you start to ultimately gear up for iPhone 17. Here it's going to be a lot different. You're going to have strength in December, March, and June. And I think the reason many have missed, we'll call it the $1.5 trillion of market cap move in Apple, is because they're so focused, sort of not seeing forest through trees. It comes down to this is a company transforming in front of us. And the consumer AI revolution will go through the doors of Cupertino.
You think they're disappointed in Vision Pro so far?
I think Vision Pro initially was much more than they ever expected. And I think for Vision Pro ultimately is about what Vision Pro looks like in 2 years, when it's essentially sunglasses at half the price. This is really more about developers right now from a Vision Pro perspective. But this is all the start, Carl. This is all the start of the new era for Apple. And that's why I think many investors are really underestimating the growth and where this is all at.